The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Thursday, June 6, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been an exciting day on the news front, but before I get to all of the news that's happening, all the things that are happening across the world, I want to, as always, thank our patrons for supporting the Benjamin Dixon Show. Without you, it is not possible. So thank you so much for what you do. If you'd like to be on the inside and see the behind the scenes and be a part of the inner circle, go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and sign up to become a member/patron of the Benjamin Dixon Show. So tonight we have to cover the testimonies from James Comey. We'll be covering the UK elections, a disturbing video out of Texas of a Hispanic man being killed by a sheriff deputy and her husband. We'll be discussing that along with some additional news. And while we are in this transition to a new phone system, we need you to call in and participate by leaving a voicemail. You can still call in. When you call in, leave a voicemail, 857-600-0518, and you can leave comments and questions inside of the chat room, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We can get those comments and or questions. All right, let's begin by discussing. All eyes were on the Senate hearing today for James Comey. And yesterday, we went over in detail what was a part of his opening statement. And it's a good thing we did that because he did not give his opening statement, not the one that he submitted for the record. What he did instead was to give brief comments as to why he was given the testimony and how he felt in general about President Trump. And when I tell you James Comey did not pull any punches, it was a fascinating event, and I call it that because of how many people. It was almost like a spectator sport event. But James Comey very directly referred to President Trump as a liar. So much so, the New York Daily News headline tomorrow, the front page on tomorrow, will be an image of President Trump that you see on the back of our screen, covered with the words liar. This is because, in no equivocal terms, James Comey did not mince words. He did not beat around the bush like most journalists do, like most politicians do. And he said that President Trump lied about why he fired him, and he lied and defamed. Actually, was the other word. He defamed not only Jim Comey but also the FBI in general. And so this was the beginning. This is how the hearing started. Now, with regard to some of the specifics, I said I was partly wrong on my prediction. My prediction was that Jim Comey would say nothing of any significance because he has respect for the institutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was wrong in that regards. Jim Comey said exactly what he felt about Donald Trump, and they, didn't mince words and revealed some things that we'll discuss. But in terms of was he going to say anything substantive to lead to the impeachment of Donald Trump in the public hearing? I can't say that he actually did that. He would not go that far, and we'll watch some of the video. He would not go far enough to say that he feels like this was obstruction, or at least he wasn't willing to say in the open hearing. There was a confidential hearing that took place shortly after that, but he was careful with what he asserted in terms of collusion, in terms of obstruction, but he was very clear that Donald Trump is a liar, and what Donald Trump requested of him vis-a-vis Michael Flynn was inappropriate enough for him to record it, and he would have reported it had he had someone to report it to. He also made that clear. He could not report it to the Attorney General because, one, the Attorney General was getting ready to recuse himself. And then he said that when he went to find someone else to report to, that those positions had not been filled. So, there's a lot of questions about why he did not take action when he felt what President Trump asked him was inappropriate. And we'll get into all of that. But let's play a couple of clips to be sure. So the first clip I want to play should, but it won't, but it should put to rest the question of whether or not Russia got involved inside of the 2016 election. This is a question being asked by the chair, Senator Burr. Senator Burr is a Republican. He is the chair of this committee. He's asking James Comey, who was appointed by a Republican, what did he believe with regard to Russia? And this is how James Comey responded.
There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose. They did it with sophistication. They did it with overwhelming technical efforts. And it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that. It's not about Republicans or Democrats. They're coming after America, which I hope we all love equally. They want to undermine our credibility in the face of the world. They think that this great experiment of ours is a threat to them, and so they're going to try to run it down and dirty it up as much as possible. That's what this is about, and they will be back because we remain, as difficult as we can be with each other, we remain that shining city on the hill, and they don't like it.
Now, there's a lot of language that James Comey uses that's very superfluous and very complimentary of America and complimentary of the FBI. And I think it's reasonable for us to take a step back and say, wait a minute, Jim, damn it, Jim, this is not all what you think it is, right? There's plenty of things that makes this shiny city on the hill problematic that we need to discuss. And his overtures with regard to the honesty and the integrity of the FBI were damn near laughable, especially for anyone who has connected to the black community. Anyone with any experience with the FBI in the past or the present. There's even here in Boston, the collusion, the outright complicity that the FBI had with one of our most notorious gangsters here, Bulger. There are plenty of stories to underscore the nefarious nature of the FBI that go beyond just J. Edgar Hoover. I just want to put it. I want to put that there because we want to be sure that even though what he's saying here is integral in making the case against Donald Trump. And even though what he's saying here really is something that I personally agree with, in the middle of his conversations was all of these accolades about the FBI that I just like, come on, Jim, not today. No, don't try that today. But back to the substance at hand. Here's what should happen after what he said. This is where we should have been, but it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why it's not going to happen for several reasons. It is clear that Russia had something to do in our election process, something along the lines of a hack, something along the lines of the distribution of a collection of emails that they got access to. And according to the FBI director, this went all the way to the top of the government. And this is something that they wanted to do, have done, and will do again. Now, this should lay to rest. It really should lay to rest the question over whether or not the Russia did anything in this election. But we still have a contingent of people who refuse to even say that Russia got involved in our election. Now, there's a qualitative difference between saying Russia got involved in our elections and saying Russia turned our election. That's totally different. That's not what I'm asserting, and that's not what the FBI director was asserting. However, people go one step too far, and now they are saying, well, I still don't believe that Russia had anything to do with this election. Do we need to clearly define what that is? Yes. Can we clearly define what that is without an investigation? No. But to sit back and say that at this point, Republicans and Democrats alike, nonpartisan people, nonpartisan organizations, bipartisan groups have all concluded with most of our intelligence community, whom, yes, we have a serious problem with on many issues. But because I have a problem with them on issue A does not mean I have to dismiss everything they say on issues B through Z. Everyone has concluded that Russia has had something to do, got involved. There's no question about it. And we need to understand what that involvement actually was, what it entailed. And I think at this point, we should be able to say, let's let this investigation go forward, and whatever the evidence says, it says. All right, that's video number one. The second question that I want to pull up that he answered was directly in regards to Donald Trump. What did he feel Donald Trump was trying to do? What impression did Donald Trump give James Comey in the meeting that he had, in the private dinner meeting that he had? And this was his response.
I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting, and so I thought it really important to document. Well, my impression, and again, it's my impression, I could always be wrong, but my common sense told me that what was going on is either he had concluded or someone had told him that you've already asked Comey to stay and you didn't get anything for it. And that the dinner was an effort to build a relationship, in fact, he asked specifically, of loyalty. And the president begins by wanting to talk about my job. So I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, 3 times you've already asked me to stay or talked about me staying. My common sense, again, I could be wrong, but my common sense told me what's going on here is he's looking to get something in exchange for granting my request to stay in the job.
Now, this was in regards to the dinner meeting that they had. He was invited to the White House for dinner. He was surprised to realize that he was the only one there at the dinner with Donald Trump. And at that dinner, Donald Trump continued to ask him 2 things. 1, are you interested in keeping your job? And then 2, will you be loyal to me? Would you pledge your loyalty to me? And at the beginning of that clip, he says, he explains why it was that he went immediately afterwards and began to document what he experienced. And he documented it because he felt that Donald Trump would lie about the encounter. That in itself should be like headline news. But at this point where we've come with Donald Trump, that's like just a footnote. The fact that the director of the FBI felt with confidence and was accurate. He was accurate about it, because you understand when Donald Trump was asked about this after the fact, he said that James Comey called the meeting. In the interview, I believe it was 60 Minutes. I forgot where the interview was, but there's a video of Donald Trump asserting that it was James Comey who called the meeting, when in fact it was Donald Trump who called the meeting. And in that same interview, he said that James Comey called the meeting to ask for his job, when in fact it was Donald Trump who was asking James Comey, are you interested in keeping your job? And so the suspicions of the FBI director were spot on. He knew that Donald Trump, his character and the personality that he is, would likely have lied about the encounter, and that's why he recorded it. And then he went on to explain how he felt that this was some type of play to get a patronage type relationship, to make sure that James Comey was subordinate and beholden, not subordinate because he's already a subordinate to Donald Trump, but beholden to Donald Trump. And he spoke about how inappropriate that made him feel. This next video clip from this session today, it was an interesting one because we wondered where the leak came from. And he was asked by a senator, she asked him, essentially what made Jim Comey release this to the press. Let's take a listen in.
Did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside of the Department of Justice?
Yes. The president tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
All right, so that was Senator Susan Collins asking him if he had given this memo or the series of memos to anyone. And this is where James Comey basically stated that he was the person that gave it directly to a friend of his who gave it to the New York Times. Now, this seems to have made a buzz in the conservative community because now they're like, oh, he released some information that was confidential. No, it wasn't confidential. He made it clear in his testimony that he recorded this memo in an unconfidential manner to give him the freedom to use that memo as he needed to. And so he was literally 3 steps ahead of Donald Trump in this regard. That's number one. He was the one to release it. Why did he release it? This is where I tweeted this morning that Donald Trump brought this hearing on himself. This entire charade, this entire encounter today was 100% the making of unforced errors by Donald Trump. And the reason I can say that with confidence is because James Comey just testified that the reason he turned over the memos to his friend, to turn it over to the media, was because Donald Trump made the thinly veiled threat saying, watch out, James Comey, because there may be tapes. You better hope that there aren't any tapes. And it was upon him saying that he realized that if there are tapes, that would make some corroborating evidence. In other words, it would no longer be a question of he said versus he said, a question of James Comey word against Donald Trump's word, but rather it would be, here are the tapes. And the only way that he felt that those tapes could be exposed and brought to light was if he set this in motion to drive an independent counsel into the equation. And he did that by leaking the memos. And the reason you had the hearing today was because of the memos being leaked. James Comey would likely not have released the memo if Donald Trump had not gotten ahead of himself and threatened him on Twitter. So everything that happened today, as angry as some people are about how this is a dog and pony show or this is a distraction, you realize this is 100% the making of Donald Trump's ego and his arrogance. All right, so let's get to the crux of it. 2 of the most important questions were these. Does James Comey think that Donald Trump tried to obstruct justice? And whether or not James Comey thought there was actual collusion with the Russians. Here's the first video. Do you think, James Comey, do you think that Donald Trump wanted to obstruct justice?
I don't think it's for me to say whether the conversation I had with the president was an effort to obstruct. I took it as a very disturbing thing, very concerning.
But when when a president of the United States in the Oval Office says something like "I hope" or "I suggest" or "would you," do you take that as a directive?
Yes. Yes, it rings in my ear as kind of, will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?
I was just going to quote that in 1170, December 29, Henry II said, "Who will rid me of this meddlesome priest?" And then the next day he was killed.
All right, so that actually was one of my favorite parts of the entire exchange because of the reference and the fact that they were both on the same page, but I digress. It was a nerd moment for me. Here's the point. A lot of hay is trying to be made, particularly by Senator Marco Rubio, over whether or not this was a direct order or whether or not the words "I hope," and this is what James Comey recorded. He said that Donald Trump told him, "I hope that you could see your way clearly to letting Michael Flynn off the hook," essentially. I'm paraphrasing at this point, but because he prefaced it with "I hope," that somehow lessened the impact or the mandate that someone would feel when sitting in the presence of the President of the United States and hearing the President of the United States say, "I hope that you would let this go." That would be received by any normal human being as something that the President of the United States wants you to do. And yet, Republicans are trying to weasel their way out and say, oh, no, it wasn't a clear case of obstruction of justice because it's something that he hoped that would happen and not something that he instructed James Comey to do. And then, of course, in their reference, they were alluding to the situation where the king said, speaking to his court, said, "Is there no one here that would rid me of this meddlesome priest?" In other words, he did not have to ask his knights directly to go and rid him of this meddlesome priest. The mere fact that he spoke this and floated this was actionable enough to make it happen. And so while the Republicans are trying to dance around this, anyone with integrity and anyone who's willing to look at this in a unbiased fashion would say that the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, saying that this is something I hope you would do, translates into "I want you to do this." Now, whether or not that in and of itself measures up to the standard required for obstruction of justice, James Comey himself stated that's not his call to make. And in fact, none of us, all of us who are just commentators or journalists who are looking in, that's not really a call for us to make. That's a legal question, whether or not this actually amounts up to obstruction of justice. And then there becomes the political portion. Because even if it meets the legal standard, it's still it's still incumbent upon the Republican Party, because they're in the majority, to actually do something about it. And Paul Ryan today has already indicated that if the roles were reversed, they would not be seeking impeachment. The GOP would not be interested in impeaching Donald Trump if he was a Democrat. In other words, saying that this is not an impeachable offense in their estimation, and they're trying to preempt the momentum that's moving towards impeachment. Now, I want to put this caveat here, because everything that we discuss on this show, we discuss with a level of nuance that tries to make the picture holistic. And this is why I'm including the fact that it's a legal question as well as a political question, but also it's a question that we need to slow down and pump our brakes and ask if this is what we want in the first place. Now, has everything that we've seen, does it seem like Donald Trump needs to be impeached over the Russian issue? I have no idea. But over what happened since he became the president of the United States on January 20th, and him asking James Comey to no longer investigate Michael Flynn, yes. This is absolutely something, and we've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's often not the original controversy that gets a person in trouble. It's the attempted cover-up that brings someone down. And this is a monster of Donald Trump's creation. And so whether or not you agree that that there is or is not evidence of Russian collusion, that's besides the point in this conversation. The real only conversation that needs to occur here is whether or not this is actual obstruction of justice. And if it is, that is an impeachable offense. And finally, I'll add this one last caveat to pump our brakes, because if it is an impeachable offense, and you can actually get some Republicans on board to do that, is that what you really want, because you would create an environment where Michael Pence is the nice, calming, collective figure on the scene, getting legislation signed into law because the specter of Donald Trump has been kicked out. In comparison to what we have now, gridlock, not because of a divided Congress, but gridlock because of an incompetent, egotistical president who does not understand the limitations of his hubris. The last video is the real question in terms of the Russian investigation. It was a question by Senator Tom Cotton, and he wanted to know, was there collusion? And I thought it was insightful to see this response from James Comey.
Do you believe Donald Trump colluded with Russia?
It's a question I don't think I should answer in an open setting. As I said, that when I left, we did not have an investigation focused on President Trump. But that's a question that'll be answered by the investigation, I think.
Indeed, that's a question that has to be answered, and it's not a question that he was able to answer in public. And there was quite a few questions that he could not answer in the public forum, and he had to wait for the confidential forum. So the question is, what's next? What actually came out in the confidential forum hearing, and whether or not it amounts to enough to be actionable, and actionable enough to make the majority party, the party of the president of the United States, join with all of the Democrats in calling for the impeachment of the president. This is the last thing I'll say about it, and then we're going to move to the UK elections. Senator Burr this morning, when he was asking his line of questions, it was very direct. It's very straight to the point. He didn't ask any questions that were irrelevant to the issue at hand. He got direct to the point, and the way those questions were asked made me pause and think that this circling of the wagons by Republicans is not concrete. In other words, there may be a chink in the armor. There may be an opening for Republicans to be picked off in order to get Donald Trump impeached, not even over Russia, but over everything that Donald Trump has done subsequently to try to cover up the incident and to try to help Michael Flynn get out of an investigation by the FBI. I want you to leave your comments and your conversations and your questions, voicemails at 857-600-0518. We'll be joined momentarily by a good friend of mine from across the pond. And we're going to be discussing the UK elections that are happening as we speak. The results are coming in, and actually we have them on the line now. Robert's Sanity. How's it going, man? First of all, thanks for joining me. I know it is super late where you are. What is it, like through 2:30 in the morning?
Yeah, you got me up late into the small early hours of the morning.
Hey, I appreciate it. We've been trying to connect for a while, and I just want to tell my audience about you. You're a political reporter on UK and Scottish affairs based in Edinburgh. You're a foreign policy writer and Gulf analysis. I really love to see your analyses that you put out, particularly on foreign affairs. And so you have a lot that you say that I listen to. So I'm glad to have you on the show. So thanks again.
No, thanks for having me. I mean, this is the show for progressives in the UK to learn about what's happening in the US. So
awesome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
That's what I like. We like to hear that. All right, so let's talk about. There seems to be, at least when I checked before I came in to prepare for the show, Theresa May is not getting what she hoped for when she called for the snap election. What's your first take on the exit polls and some of the actual results that are coming in?
Yeah. So I mean, the exit polls, obviously, it's a testy affair here in the UK because we had the Brexit polls, which told us that Remain was going to win by a slim margin. That was the referendum last summer to stay within the EU, for the UK to stay within the EU, and it turned out that actually people had voted to leave. Mm-hmm. We also had the debacle with the polling analysts in 2015 who said that it was going to be a Labour government, and it ended up being a Conservative majority. We call the Conservatives Tories here. Mm-hmm. So really that's the wider sort of context in terms of the numbers. I mean, we're seeing that the Labour Party could end up with 266 seats. Mm-hmm. They're still the second biggest party. But this is a disaster for the Tories, for the Conservative Party. Theresa May has gambled after months and months of saying that she didn't want to hold an election. She now decided that she did want to have an election, and that was really based on the entire political culture over here that said that Jeremy Corbyn was too left-wing, too Marxist, too much of a progressive, and that he couldn't be trusted on issues like national security. He would spend too much on the National Health Service, on public services, on policemen, on nurses, on firemen. And so she gambled. She gambled similar to the way that David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, gambled on the EU referendum. And it looks like it hasn't paid off. And really what you have is a Prime Minister that thought she would get away with a maybe 150-seat majority, now losing her overall majority. So the Conservatives would still have 314 seats in the House of Commons, but it would mean that they wouldn't be able to pass through laws with an overwhelming majority over all the other parties in the British Parliament. So it's an absolute disaster, and the sort of the game of a sort of gamble that the Tories have played has failed.
So she went in with a majority that didn't require a coalition government. She went in with over the 326 needed for the majority, and it looks like, at least according to the exit polls, and we'll give all the caveats that you just gave, the exit polls are just that, they're exit polls, and the actual results are still coming in. But based on the exit polls, they're only poised, like you said, to get about 314 seats. So she lost a net of 17 seats. So she went in to get more, an even larger majority, based on the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was ostensibly unpopular and ended up coming out with less. Before we go into any more detail, even if they maintain them, which they are, they're going to maintain at least a plurality and whatever kind of government they can pull together. Do you think Theresa May will be able to be the leader of that coalition government?
Oh, this is interesting, isn't it? I mean, you have a woman who portrayed an image of being a school mistress, and the British like that. We like strict women. Who she was restrained. She was a safe pair of hands compared to Boris Johnson, who the flamboyant now foreign secretary, who was the sort of bumbling public schoolboy from sort of the aristocracy. So she had crafted an image of stability, and she's been completely shown up in this election, where she's refused to first meet members of the public. She refused to do the TV debates. So her image of being this stable leader, this sort of low conservative leader, has been demolished, and it is tricky to see how she can continue. It's definitely plausible to think that she'll be gone at least by Christmas, because you have other rivals such as Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary. You have Michael Gove, who went over to your side of the pond to interview Donald Trump for the Times.
Yeah.
You have Liam, who has dodgy dealings with Saudi intelligence services, as well as some Gulf money men. So there are a range of people who could come in and shunt her aside, and she has damaged the Tory brand. To face a leader such as Jeremy Corbyn, who has been castigated as too weak, as too left-wing, who was perceived to be leading the Labour Party to only have 100 seats and to lose 17 seats herself, there's no way she can possibly survive that.
Let's talk about Jeremy Corbyn and the possibility. All right, so there's like this slim possibility of him being able to form a minority government because of how the results, at least how the exit results are looking. We'll see before the end of the night over here. I think the sun will be coming up over there by the time we get a final answer. So let's talk about Jeremy Corbyn on two wavelengths. Like what are the conversations going on over there, the reality or the possibility of the Labour Party actually being able to build a majority coalition?
Oh, well, this is where British politics gets exciting for the first time in a while. I mean, the possibilities are endless. There is a chance that the Scottish National Party, who themselves have gone through a tricky night losing seats up in Scotland, they possibly could form a sort of an informal agreement with Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, by which they supply a policy by policy support for law that goes through, because they're broadly similar in terms of being progressive. Of course, the thing that separates them is the issue of whether Scotland should remain in the UK or go its own way and stay within the European Union. So there's a possibility of a Labour SNP alliance. You have one Green MP, Caroline Lucas, who is very much loved by progressives in the UK. She would certainly be brought into the fold. You have some Northern Irish MPs from all kinds of hues, those who represent the Catholic community in Northern Ireland, those who are more on the Protestant side, those who are moderate. They'll be spoken to as well. They've been ignored during the British elections and the TV debates. So Corbyn's got a real chance to actually get on the phone by this morning and talk to a whole range of people. But the three options would be Labour and the SNP, Labour, the SNP and the Greens, or even the Liberal Democrats, a kind of liberal centrist, socially liberal party which tries to position itself within the middle of Labour and the Tories here. So there's an opportunity for what we would call a rainbow coalition government. But the problem is that on the face of it, these are all progressive parties, the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, the one Green MP and the Labour Party under Corbyn. But there are serious policy differences. The Liberal Democrats disagree with Corbyn on the issue of Brexit. They don't want to pull out of the European Union. They want another referendum. Corbyn comes from an old socialist school within the UK politics, which kind of sees the EU as just a slightly better version of sort of British neoliberalism, and he's not at all that fussed about staying within the European Union. So that could be a deal breaker. So Corbyn has a whole range of options there, but it really depends on getting on that phone and having serious conversations with people. So
this is like a major opportunity, right? And this is where I have to lean heavy on you, because I have no idea about the answer to the question I'm going to ask you. Do you think the opportunity to have Labour lead there to get a coalition with the Liberal Democrats, do you think that is strong enough for Corbyn to negotiate on a new referendum on the EU?
I don't think so. The commentary here is divided, because Brexit is one of those constitutional issues which has shaped the nature of politics in the UK. I'm not convinced, and I think my view is supported by UK researchers such as Matthew Goodwin, who sometimes does polling research for the New Statesman over there. He suggests that that hardcore Remain section of the electorate, hardcore pro-European section of the British public is just not big enough. I think there's a consensus within the Labour Party under Corbyn, either people in the Labour Party who are pro-Corbyn or a lot of the Labour Party who are actually stabbing him in the back and have done for the past year. They both actually have come to the conclusion of, look, Brexit's going to happen. We're going to leave. There's a clear majority of it, and actually there's a kind of small c conservative instinct within the British public which suggests that they just want to get on with it. They don't like sort of umming and ahhing over the issue. I can't see any coalition government, any coalition agreement being built on the idea of going back into the European Union. There would be a chance, however, of Corbyn making a concession to the Liberal Democrats, saying, I will go to Europe as Prime Minister of a minority coalition Labour government with the Lib Dems, and I will negotiate a set of terms for Brexit. So after we leave, I'll talk to Europe about what the trade agreements are going to be like, our interaction with defence, with the European Court of Human Rights, and then I'll bring another referendum to the people based on that deal. That's the only new referendum that could be brought forward.
Interesting. So Brexit, regardless, at this point, Brexit is going forward, and it's not really something that he can use to negotiate to form a coalition government over there.
I don't think so. I don't think so. It would be too problematic for Labour because you've still got the fact that a large section of voters in all parties want to leave. And that the problem with trying to build a coalition based on that is it would give the Conservatives a way back into the national debate, because the Conservatives could suggest that they are the one true party that wants to stand up for Britishness and wants to stand up against the European Union. So I don't think that Corbyn would take that risk at all.
That's I can see that that opens an opportunity for them that the Conservatives would certainly seize upon. One last question for you, Robert, and I know that you've got a lot going on over there. We'll get these results as we come in, and we'll be discussing it tonight throughout the night. Do you see the shift, the swing that happened today, or potentially happening, and we'll get the final results? Do you see this as a result of a move towards the left, or a referendum against Theresa May calling a snap election, or do you see it as some third phenomenon that I'm not considering at this point?
I'd be bold enough, very bold enough, to describe it as a move towards the left. But that has to be taken with a pinch of salt. I mean, the reason why Corbyn's, you could call it a victory. I mean, it's a loss, but it's the fact that he hasn't been destroyed, like so many commentators, especially on the liberal centre, were so keen to see him lose in humiliating fashion, really reverses the trend we've seen for 40 years in this country. It's vital for British politics because it means that there's finally an alternative. In the UK, very similar to US politics in the sense of anyone who advocates for nationalisation of public services is deemed to be a Maoist. Anyone who suggests that privatising the NHS is maybe seen as cutting edge and entrepreneurial, and anyone who wants to hold towards vaguely soft left principles is demonised. We're starting to see the tide turn back towards a more social democratic, a new social democratic trend. So I think Corbyn does represent that, but we also have to watch out for the reaction of his party. You remember, Corbyn does represent a huge coming together of different sections of society, the enthusiasm of the young as well, who have come out in record numbers. That's something that has to be part of the record. But remember, a massive section of the Parliamentary Labour Party behind him are not of the same hue. They're very much Hillary Clinton Democrat style social democrats, really. I mean, that's where they reside, very centrist. And so I take all of these advances with a pinch of salt. It's a great personal victory and vindication for him, but let's see what happens in terms of his relationship with the Labour Party he's leading.
Listen, thanks so much. We've been joined by Robert Simony, and he is a political reporter on UK and Scottish affairs, based out of Edinburgh, and your focus on foreign policy and Gulf analysis. That's really where I enjoy reading your work. Can you tell everyone how they can get up with you and where they can read some of your work?
I've got my Twitter handle is probably the easiest place to find me. Robert J. Somony, SOMYNNE. You can catch some of my opinion pieces on the UK website of The Guardian. I do some writing for websites such as Press TV and the New Arab. So just obviously, follow me, and I'd love to interact with people on issues such as foreign affairs and UK politics. So I look forward to hearing from all of your audience.
All right, Robert, I have to be corny real quick. So I wouldn't refer to you in a conversation between you and me. I wouldn't say governor to you. I would say bruv. Bruv?
All right, bruv.
Is it bruv? Or does anyone even say bruv in there, or is it just bruv?
It's just bruv.
Bruv.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, bruv. I appreciate it. We'll see you online.
All right, thanks.
857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. Robert Somany, got to have him back, man. I think that was a spot-on analysis. You probably couldn't get that as good on the BBC if you tried. Let's shift gears here. I'm ready to go home, to be honest. Is there anything else like serious that we need to hit before we get out of here? Those are the two top stories of the day that we definitely need to cover. Audience, if you want to finish the show in a full hour, send some voicemails. We're going to do this question and answer segment. We had some questions that were sent in by fans of the show or supporters of the show, and we also have a voicemail that we want to play and answer that. And so we'll give you some time to share some of your questions and comments of the day. Let's take a listen to that voice mail. Let's go.
Hey, Ben, this is Nicholas from Oregon. I just wanted to come back for a second and ask a question that I'd asked maybe a week and a half ago about whether Trump and Pence are, or what kind of fallout, I guess, to be hyperbolic, would be. Would Trump be, nuclear disaster? Would Trump be, theocratic, nightmare, et cetera, et cetera? And I didn't know if I got a really clear message from you last time, but recently, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Jeet here kind of made a thread about that same kind of thing about how, oh, well, people say, if we impeach Trump, we're going to get Pence. And he kind of made the same point that I feel like I did, which was that, Pence is, essentially incompetent, essentially not able to make anything happen well. And he used in something, an example I wasn't able to, the transition team into the White House. So I'm curious if you have any more feelings on that, whether or not you saw that thread, whether you agree with him or not, and just curious to hear your opinion on that again.
Yeah.
It's a conversation I've been having a lot with a lot of friends of mine. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the show. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for the call. So I remember the question, and I do remember that thread from Jeet here or here Jeet. I forgot how which it is, or Heat Jeet, whatever. So it's a question that I think we have to really think about right now, particularly because Donald Trump, if there was a Democratic Congress and a Democratic House, Senate rather, Donald Trump would be impeached. Not just for political games, but for what appears to be obstruction of justice. And there may be some Republicans that can be picked off. I don't really think we'll get there, but it's possible. Jeet here, thank you, that's his name. And in this thread from Jeet here, he discussed why we should go ahead and under any circumstance possible, just get rid of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump poses a nuclear threat. Like, the threat level of Donald Trump is a possible nuclear holocaust. With Mike Pence, the threat level is a slew of legislation that would be, essentially set us back to the Gilded Age and the Dark Ages with regards to social issues. Gilded Age economically, of course. And I push back against that very significantly because for the longest time, I did not believe that Donald Trump represents any more of a significant threat in terms of a nuclear holocaust than any other president. And that's because the reason I felt that way is because you're being extremely hyperbolic. There's a big step between there's a big step between someone being a bumbling idiot and someone being a bumbling idiot who's willing to end the world. right? But there is the shifting tide of Donald Trump's idiocy that is not suggesting to me, or rather it is suggesting to me, that he could really destroy the world, not out of the arrogance of his hubris, but out of not understanding how this thing works well enough to help maintain the post-war order. And what I mean by that is particularly when he announced to Duterte of the Philippines that where our two subs were, two nuclear subs near China. When he announced that to Duterte, to me, that's a destabilizing force that could set things into motion that will steampile into something that's uncontrollable, because knowing the location of two of our nuclear subs does give a strategic advantage to China. Now, whether or not China is going to actually seize upon it, well, there's a huge step between China getting this information and seizing the moment to take advantage of it. I get there's a lifetime of difference between those two steps, but the mere fact that Donald Trump's idiocy provided the opportunity raises the threat level from 0 to me to 0.5 out of 10, right? So it does increase the threat level. It's something that we have to consider. He's an idiot, and can he be reined in enough to secure the post-war order? And you'll see that's going to be a recurring refrain on the show, because a lot of things that Donald Trump is doing undermines the post-war order. And I'm all for criticizing, critiquing, analyzing, and seeing how we can make the American hegemony in the post-war order better. But unless you have a solution as to what should come to replace it, I don't think any of us should be happy about Donald Trump undermining the post-war, and when I say post-war, World War II, obviously, order. Now, the odds, because I like to play poker. The odds are definitely in favor of Mike Pence doing more damage than Donald Trump, because, like I said, there's so many steps between 0 and nuclear war on the equation of Donald Trump. But the pot is a lot, the bet is a lot higher. That's the problem with Donald Trump, right? But with Mike Pence, it's going to be consistently just issue after issue, legislation after legislation, turnaround over and over again, where he's going to be consistently destroying everything that progressives have worked on for the last 60, 70 years. We could see it all undermined just in 100 days of Mike Pence. And so what's the answer? I don't think I have an answer other than to say, what type of gambles do you like? Do you like really large pots with a big risk, but a big reward? Because with Donald Trump, the big reward is he's not going to get anything done whatsoever. The risk is he might be dumb enough to lead us into a nuclear war. With Mike Pence, small bets, guaranteed, wins after win on social issues and economic issues. I really don't know how to answer that for you other than to say, which type of bet do you like? 857-600-0518. Let's take a listen to this next voicemail and see what our listener has to say.
Hey, Ben. This is Seamus from Staten Island. I'm just wondering if you've heard of this Juliana versus the United States, the lawsuit brought up by 21 young plaintiffs who argue that their constitutional and public trust rights are being violated by the government's creation of climate danger. The case is apparently one of many related legal actions brought by youth in several states and counties, all supported by Our Children's Trust, Our Children's Trust, seeking science-based action by governments to stabilize the climate system. It seems pretty notable. It's out of Oregon. Seems this Juliana versus United States lawsuit is. Just wondering if you ever heard of it. And sounds like it's a good idea. We can help our kids get some, justice for what the government's doing. Just blatantly, lying or whatever it is that they're doing. So, thanks. Take it easy.
So no, up until now, I had not heard of Juliana versus the United States, but there's an academic commentary at jurist.com that I found describing it as, I'll read one paragraph from it. Quote, climate change is one of the most universal threats of our time. The burning of fossil fuel emits greenhouse gases into our warming atmosphere and accelerates the deterioration of our environment. Impacts of climate change rise from flood, droughts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they say this is not an ordinary lawsuit, but this is rather a hopeful reading of this case's opinions, which enables the parties to proceed, et cetera, et cetera. I have to read it again to read it in full to actually give you something, to pull something out of it. But if I'm reading what I read and what I listened to correctly, it seems to be a lawsuit on behalf of a younger generation suing the United States to move us into a direction that will protect the future that they have to live in. I think it's fascinating, and I think that needs a lot more attention. It's definitely something I will draw more attention to as soon as I get a chance to dig into it a little bit more. But thank you for bringing that to the attention of the show. We have a question from Twitter. Let's pull that up on the screen. Twitter wants to know, at SHS, question for Ben, doesn't the United States fund or sponsor terrorism? Freedom fighter or a terrorist? Hegemony or empire? It depends on who you're asking, right? So you're asking me, and of course, I'm not going to give you a straight answer. This is what I'm going to say. The people who experience what America does in the Middle East would, in no uncertain terms, call it terrorism. And I think that's a fair statement. And I want to leave it there, but there's so much more that I want to say, so I don't really know if I want to leave it there or not. Here's the problem. I guess I want to say something. Here's the problem. All right. The problem is the people who win wars get to make the rules, and the people with the biggest guns get to make the rules, and they get to make the definitions of the words, right? And so we are scrambling as leftists / progressives / people who see a problem with what America does with their empire abroad. We're scrambling to fight against a tide that I'm not sure we're going to admit how big that tide really is. And what I'm saying here is that we're really fighting against the definition of words themselves, and whether or not we can ever get in the American lexicon the idea that the things that America does in the Middle East and North African nations is actually its own form of terrorism. That would require a complete rearranging of thinking, of the collective psyche, to understand that it doesn't matter if America is the most powerful nation in the world and we set the terms of engagement across the globe. It doesn't matter. What matters is America a threat in a similar fashion? Does America engage in behaviors that are similar to, because as we define terrorism, political ends, right? You're engaging in acts of violence for political ends. I mean, but that definition itself, war in itself is terrorism. So if we go with that definition, then everybody's engaged in terrorism and then nobody's engaged in terrorism. The point is this, is that we're fighting against something that's actually bigger than the question here. The question is asking, does America engage in terrorism? The real question is whether or not we are able to transcend, and I mean this, as I'm saying it, it sounds like bullshit, but I really mean it. Whether or not we can transcend this norm that is accepted across the globe, that those in power get to dictate the rules for those who are weak. And that is a problem, because as long as America is the greatest power on the face of the earth, there's really no advantage. There's nothing that's going to come of that question, because who's going to enforce it on America? Who's going to say to America, who is going to be powerful enough to say to America that you are engaged in acts of terrorism and you need to be penalized for it? We can say it, but are we going to be able to execute any type of penalty against the United States of America? No, we won't. But the simplistic answer is, for anyone who's experiencing America's adventurism abroad in the Middle East and North African nations in particular, I have no question in my mind that they would view America as the greatest purveyor of terrorism. Ask someone in Kansas and they'll say you're just a communist. 857-600-05 888-878-8218 if you want to leave a voicemail. We only have 4 more minutes left. Next week, or actually tomorrow on the bonus show, I'm going to discuss what's going on in Qatar. And I want to spend some time with the Dodd-Frank repeal passage that that passed the House of Representatives today. We'll discuss that at length on tomorrow's bonus show. Tomorrow's bonus show is for members, for patrons. If you want to become a patron, not 857, but go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show. And what we want to do before we get out of here, we want to make sure that you are checking out something at theprogressivearmy.com. We have a live blog that's going on right now with Kirk Hackbarth, Salam Marcos, and Colin Moyers. It gives you an update on the campaign, on the election results coming from the UK, live numbers there. These are the update. These are not numbers based on the exit poll, but these are actual results. Those are being updated throughout the night. And below that, you have all of the commentary. So we want you to commentary and discussion into the UK election. So go to progressivearmy.com right now and check it out and be a part of that conversation and be a part of what the Progressive Army is doing. Sign up for the blog, sign up for the Progressive Army, become a patron, all of that good stuff. Max, you ready to go? Let's go.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.